How do you introduce someone that makes the term badass pale in comparison to what he's actually accomplished? This is totally fair. Brandon Webb is the person you want in your corner when crisis strikes. He's a former US Navy SEAL sniper, an entrepreneur with SoFrep.com and CrateClub.com, New York Times bestselling author, a member of the YPO New York City chapter, a former veteran advisor to the US Small Business Administration, and Harvard Business School OPM 56. There are few people in the world as uniquely qualified to help you build the techniques to adapt and overcome. Brandon's a good friend, super excited to have you, and I just saw him pop in. So waiting for him to jump on. There we go. Mr. Webb, thank you for joining us. Take it away, sir. He's on there. I don't think he has sound yet. Can't hear you. Oh, connecting audio. Nope. Oh, you're muted.
How do you hear me now?
Yeah, gotcha.
Nice.
Take it away, buddy.
All right. And you already gave me an introduction, right?
I did. You're good to go.
Okay. All right. Good to go.
I said you're a legend and a badass. You're good.
Okay. We'll see about that. So anyway, thanks for having me. I'm obviously friends with Eric and have been a client of Hawke's in the past. So I appreciate you guys having me for the conference. This talk is going to be mostly about mindset. And I've given this talk a couple times recently last week to my YPO chapter in New York City, really relating my experiences as a sniper instructor, being involved in kind of overhauling the Navy SEAL sniper program and modernizing it. But my biggest contribution to that course was around mindset. I wrote a curriculum for it when I was a course manager. So this talk, I'll give a little bit of an in-depth introduction. I won't go too in-depth because I know Eric gave me one already, but I'll cover my intro, then some principles of mental management, really conscious mind versus subconscious, self-image, power of visualization, positive coaching versus negative coaching, and then we'll open it up for Q&A the last 10 minutes. The main goal is that you guys will be able to walk away with some tools based on my own experience, share with you guys as a former Navy SEAL, former sniper, course manager, and entrepreneur. So that's the goal. Just a little bit of a background on myself. I actually grew up in California, originally born in Canada, raised on a sailboat by hippie parents. I left home at 16, joined the Navy when I was 18 years old to get money for college. Ended up being stationed at SEAL Team 3 in San Diego, California in 1998, deployed to the Middle East, was on the USS Cole after it. It got bombed in Aden, Yemen. I led a sniper team on the USS Cole and set up a protective perimeter to make sure that nobody else could sink the boat. If you guys don't remember that time in history, the USS Cole was a $1 billion Navy warship pulled into the port of Aden, Yemen, and two guys in a rowboat with explosives blew a massive hole in the side of the ship, killed 17 sailors, and almost sank the boat. So it was an interesting time in history for me, just noticing that the nature of warfare has changed from conventional to unconventional. Deployed to Afghanistan after 9/11, came back, was a sniper trainer, and then got recruited down to the Navy SEAL sniper program, which is a 3-month-long course, incredibly challenging, 3 months, 7 days a week. And we take existing Navy SEALs, so already highly motivated individuals. And just to give you an idea what it takes to make it through Navy SEAL training, I classed up with class 215. We started with 220 students, and a little over 6 months later, we graduated 23. So about a 90% failure rate. So the guys that were getting into the SEAL program or the sniper program were already highly motivated, trained snipers. The course was 3 months long. We used to have about a 30% failure rate. It's known within our community as the sniper course is one of the toughest in the SEAL training curriculum. When we implemented what I'm about to share with you, we took a 30% failure rate nearly down to zero. It's because we became better teachers, better coaches. We taught the practices that are embodied at the highest level of performance in both the sporting and Olympic arena. So hopefully I'll get into some of this stuff, and you guys will be able to take some of this away and back to your own lives and businesses, and hopefully it will help. Let's see. Oh, I did want to read you guys just an opening paragraph that we would get the new sniper students in the classroom, and this is what we would read them, just to give you guys an idea of how intense the program was. So I'll read it right now. So we would tell the sniper students essentially, like, we're going to push the limits of your performance to such high levels that even when you are rusty, tired, or unpracticed, you will still outperform the enemy. You'll be expected to deliver at such a high level of excellence that at first it will seem unrealistic, unfair, unreasonable. You will come to know perfection as your new normal, and you'll be expected to deliver at that level of perfection day after grinding day without misstep. So that's kind of like our level set when these guys would check in. Obviously, really setting the bar right away. So a little background on my involvement. This was at a time in the SEAL community. It was after 9/11 when we recognized that our program needed to be modernized, but also we needed to teach better. So I ended up being a part of this cadre that had access to some of the best consultants in the world. And so we developed this kind of mental management program based off of a lot of it. I would say most of the influence came from the Olympic gold medalists in their training regimes. And then an Olympic gold medalist himself named Lanny Basham, great book called With Winning in Mind. Again, With Winning in Mind, you can get it on Amazon, amazing book. Lanny was kind of the pioneer of mental management in Olympic sport, and today that's his business. So a couple things. When we'll talk about conscious mind versus conscious mind versus subconscious mind. Anytime you're learning something new or in a new environment, your conscious mind is present. You're having to really concentrate and focus on the task, whereas the subconscious mind, if you train to the level where your subconscious mind takes over, it's kind of like driving a car home from work. You're on a phone with your friend, you pull the car into the driveway and you're like, God, I don't even remember the last 30 minutes. That's your subconscious mind at work. The goal when we were training snipers was to get them so highly trained that subconscious mind would take over. Like they would get behind the trigger in the combat environment, in the zone, and be in that subconscious mind state. A lot of athletes call this flow state. So some of you may have heard that before. So that's the key, is to train the mind to get to the subconscious level. And so another big thing that we work on in the SEAL sniper program is self-image. We all walk around with a certain self-image of ourselves that gets influenced by not just the environment, the people we hang out with, but also the little voice that's inside our head, right? So self-image is critical, and we would teach the students to kind of break down their self-image and rebuild it up in their own kind of image. It's kind of like, and it's true, like the good news is if you have self-image issues, and everybody does, this is something that you always have to work on. You can rebuild the self-image. That's the good news. It's like developing a habit. It takes, about 60 days, but you can do this. Part of the self-image is removing self-limiting barriers. We've all heard people talk about themselves in the way that I'm not good at math, I'm not good at remembering names, I'm not good at sports. I just saw a sales talk online a few weeks ago by the guy that was, he was the original Wolf of Wall Street. He inspired the movie with Leo DiCaprio. Maybe not a great guy all around, but the guy can sell, and he gave a great sales conference. But I was watching this video, and he's on stage and he's saying, oh, I have to put my drink over here because I'm a spiller. And so people that signal stuff like that are signaling that they have this self-imposed limit, right? So we commonly walk around and think of ourselves in certain ways. The key, if you want to develop new skills or think about yourself differently, is you have to change that internal monologue. You have to think of yourself as, I am good at remembering names. It's like me to remember everybody's name as well. Now you have to train and develop habits around that, but the point is the self-image is critical for that kind of stuff. So we really work with the sniper students on self-image. And basically, if you think of yourself a certain way, or you have self-doubt, you have to identify that. It's okay, it exists in everybody, and then you have to fix it. And part of some good tools to fixing self-image, you can get in my last book, Mastering Fear, which is actually free right now. You can get the digital copy on my website, BrandonTylerWebb.com. Just go there, download the book for free. There's a lot of tools in there about everything I'm talking about. So self-image, that's a little bit on self-image. What we would tell the students in the past was that it's okay to shoot a certain score. We have, just like any test in school, we have this very complex, hard shooting test, 100% total points possible. In the past, we would tell students, they would ask, what's a good score? We'd say, well, if you're shooting like 85, 90, you're pretty good. Well, we changed that when we realized that we needed to raise the bar up higher, like art, and like I read in that opening paragraph, perfection is what we expected. So we said, well, what we're expecting you to shoot is 100%. And when we started putting that out into the world for the first time, we started having perfect scores. And this is interesting in the scope of goal setting. Obviously you have to be grounded in reality, but it was interesting to see this happen right in front of my face when, for the first time in the history of the sniper program, we started having students shoot perfect scores because we told them it was possible, and we told them that was the new normal. So think about that in your own life and your company as well. So let's see, visualization. Visualization is an extremely powerful tool. It's essentially mental rehearsal. I've used it as a sniper. I've used it as a public speaker. I've used it as a pilot to take my initial instrument rating exam. And so your brain doesn't know whether you're doing something in the real world, or you can close your eyes and kind of imagine yourself. We've all kind of had these thoughts in our head, and maybe you're giving a public talk or you have to give a presentation and you're imagining yourself, and all of a sudden your heartbeat increases, you start sweating. It's just an example of how you can put yourself in these situations and rehearse. And so I'm going to tell you a quick story about visualization to kind of drive it home. But I can tell you what we would do with the students is train them in the art and science of being a sniper, get them out on the shooting range. We do a ton of practical application. And then at night when they would go home, they would have homework, and they would have to visualize them doing that whole day previously. The next day, visualize it, not only visualize for perfection, but also rehearse contingencies, because inevitably things go wrong. So they would have to rehearse like every possible scenario that could go wrong. They'd rehearse it in their head. So that way, when it happened in the real world, they would be much better prepared. A quick story on visualization, what really drove home the power of visualization for me was a story of a guy named Jack Sands. He was a captain in the Navy, shot down over Vietnam. He was a pilot, spent 4 years plus in a prisoner of war camp called the Hanoi Hilton, for those of you who don't know. Basically lived 4 years in a concrete box. So when I think about do we have it that rough in the quarantine situation at home? not as bad as Jack Sands. Here's a guy that spent a little over 4 years in a concrete box, came home. How he got over his kind of confinement and what really gave him the will to kind of live and carry on and was his happy place was he played golf. He was an avid golfer. So he would play all his favorite golf courses in his head over and over and over for 4 years. Fast forward, he gets flown home. The war is over. He's in San Diego. They're driving him to the Balboa Naval Hospital. He passes the back gate at Naval Station North Island. For those of you that are familiar, there's a big golf course there. He stops the driver and says, "Let me out of here. I have to play golf." They look at him like, "You're crazy. You're in the worst health of your life." He says, "I don't care. Pull over." So he goes into the clubhouse, tells the clubhouse who he is. These guys are like in tears. They take him to the pro shop. He says, "I just want to shoot 18 holes." He plays entire 18 holes and shoots a par score. And these guys are dumbfounded. They're looking at him like, how is this possible? And Jack says, "I haven't hit a bad shot in 4 years. I've been playing perfect golf in my head." So there's a little bit of a proof on just how powerful visualization is. Here's a guy that probably couldn't shoot 18 holes par before he left on deployment and got shot down, but through playing perfect golf, because he had the skills already developed, but by playing perfect golf in his head, was able to shoot 18 holes par, probably the worst physical condition of his life. So visualization is an extremely powerful tool. Another powerful thing that I use in my own business today is the difference between negative coaching versus positive coaching. And the difference, I'll use a sports analogy. If a coach says to a kid in baseball, and let's call the kid Johnny. Johnny's going up to bat, and the coach says, "Hey, Johnny, whatever you do, don't strike out." What is the kid thinking about? He's automatically planted this negative image in this kid's head, rather than say, on the positive side, you would say, "Hey, Johnny, swing for the fences, knock it out of the park." Both are trying to accomplish the same thing, but two very different styles of communication, one negative, one positive. How you talk to yourself and how you talk to your subordinates, your teams, incredibly important, because it really does matter how we communicate. We all know how powerful language is. And so, think and check yourself. Am I putting a positive image in this person's head or a negative? And so we changed from a very clear negative teaching style. We would yell at these students and point out all these mistakes. And there was mistakes that we were describing that 3 people down the shooting line didn't even realize existed, but all of a sudden they had them in their head, and that's all they could think about. We decided, okay, this person needs a corrective action. Let's give them the positive coaching needed just to correct the deficiency. And so I think about that in business a lot. Okay, this person's having a problem. Why am I going to harp on everything he's doing wrong when I just need to tell him or her the proper steps and coach them along to being successful? And the negative versus positive is a huge, huge thing. And I can tell whether I'm running a meeting, talking to my own team, talking to outside consultants. It's very obvious to me whether someone has a solution mindset, really is a positive mindset, or negative mindset. Extremely powerful stuff. Let's see. So again, it's hard to teach a 3-hour course in 20 minutes, but I gave you guys some pretty high level overview. And again, all this stuff, helped us take a course that was failing 30% of the students and take that 30% nearly down to 0. We started passing everybody. The course didn't get easier. If anything, it got harder. We were passing everybody because we were just better teachers. So with that said, I'll open it up for 10 minutes of Q&A. I think I'm 1 minute over, but I'd love to hear you guys' questions. And I don't know if I mentioned today, I run a digital media and e-commerce company called, one of the brands is Crate Club, the other one is Hawke Media, and that's my business today. But let's take some questions. I see you're live now, Eric.
Yeah, so for questions, guys, another reminder, just hashtag on Twitter, hashtag QCon. That's where we're monitoring, just waiting for we have a lot of great comments and shout outs, but waiting for some questions. And yeah, I'm curious, while we wait on that, Brandon, you pivoted, you have this amazing online business. How's that going? How's Crate Club doing right now? How's your business doing?
Fortunately, our business, we are definitely impacted by COVID. Our media is up. Our digital subscriptions are up. Our store is up 50%. Crate Club, I paused because we're having issues with some of our vendors going out of business or our suppliers. Mm-hmm. And it's because global supply chains have been totally disrupted, even domestically, right? Like people just can't go to the factory and produce product. So we're in talks to potentially spin off that part of the business to a competitor. But all our other business is up, thankfully. I mean, it's, as somebody that's been in business 8 years now, I'm just thankful my team, which is incredible, all has gainful employment. I just cannot imagine. You've been there, Eric, where you're losing sleep over payroll because you care about your employees. So I'm just thankful that we're doing okay.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I mean, you guys have been, you've always been remote, right? Like this operationally didn't miss really a beat.
Yeah, we've run a remote business for over 8 years outside of a small executive office in New York. So yeah, we very familiar with the remote environment.
So first question popped in. Brandon, how do you deal with negative people?
I get them out of my life. Yeah, no, it's a great example. I hired a very senior C-level person, and it was, part of the reason why I use predictive index now. There are plenty of other services out there, but it's a very in-depth AI-based, essentially psychological profile. I use that now because I've made a couple bad hiring mistakes, but I do not tolerate negativity. I don't tolerate it. I literally just fired an insurance broker yesterday. We paid the policy year in advance. I fired them to replace them because they just weren't treating my staff, like the brokers weren't treating my staff with dignity, and I just have no place for that.
Yep.
And I think that in this type of environment, you're either going to work with your partners in business and everybody pitch in to get through it, or you're going to notice the people that are trying to like extract every last bit of, they're transactional, right? They're not thinking long-term. They're like, oh, I'm going to get this money out of this person. I'm not going to work with them, or the opposite, right? And we remember that. We're going to remember who worked with us and who didn't.
Totally agree. Next question. How have you applied your military skills into business, where I'm guessing that it must be more multicultural than in the Army force? Kind of a two question, but.
Yeah, believe it or not, the military experience is probably the most multicultural environment, meritocratic environment that you can have. Like it really taught me how to work with people from all sorts of different backgrounds, religions, race, which is it's a gift. I don't think, unless you serve in the military, you don't realize that you get that. And the military teaches you a lot about personal responsibility. What I've taken away from my experience, obviously the mental management stuff, being able to work in small teams as a former SEAL, execution, it's a strength of mine, and it is a weakness as well, because sometimes I take on a little too much. My VP of marketing had to reel me in the other day because we're launching a new product, and I wanted to do something else on top of it. She's just like, time out, it's too much. But, the big military takeaways are, strategy development. You have to have a clear strategy. Everybody in the organization can understand. You have to be able to execute. I see so many entrepreneurs just afraid to kind of get out there and execute any type of plan, or even, a lot of them forget how to sell. They use fundraising as a form of entrepreneur's welfare. But, those are kind of the big takeaways for me with the military experience.
Someone has asked if you could just speak more on mental health and like how to deal with near-death experiences and how to cope with everything.
I mean, listen, life is a motherfucker. Sorry for my French. I've lost, you and I are both in YPO, Eric.
Yeah.
Young Presidents Organization. The friendships I've made in YPO have made a huge difference for me, because I spent most of my young adulthood in the SEAL community, in the military, and a lot of my close friends died in the war, or they died due to some form of, mental illness, for being overexposed to combat trauma. It has to do with mindset. I could choose to dwell on that and all that stuff, or, choose to look forward and kind of realize, okay, that was in the past, but what does the future hold? And it doesn't matter. You don't have to be a combat Navy SEAL to experience the kind of harshness of life. Like, life is tough, and it's just, how you deal with that in your own head really determines, whether you're going to be successful or not. Because I think you and I can agree, Eric, nobody by any stretches of the definition of success that we know has a negative mindset.
Yeah.
We were just eating dinner with Colin, the guy that towed that sled across Antarctica.
The first person walked across Antarctica for 2 months. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, good point. And how do you tell someone he's a lousy leader? Like, how do you have that conversation with him without having him feel threatened?
I mean, one of the common leadership 101 I see is people airing stuff in a reply all, or they're taking issue in a group setting. If you have an issue with somebody, you take them aside privately, in a safe environment, and you just are very candid with that person. But you also, I would never go to a situation where I have an issue, and I'm just going to vent on that person. Like, I'm already in my head, like, okay, here's what happened. Here's the situation. How do we pivot out of this into what's the solution, right? And so, I think too often people just get emotionally triggered. They start yelling. But really it should be a private conversation, and you need to have a work environment that enables that as well. Like, I was so happy my VP of marketing, felt safe enough to call me and say, Brandon, you're overloading the team. We've got too much on our plate. You need to take this little side project of yours and shove it to Q4. I was like, you're right. And so I'm thankful that we have an environment where we can be candid with each other.
Well, as always, Brandon, thank you so much for your time. This has been awesome. If you want, you can hang out in Slack and answer a few more questions. We have some on Twitter as well if you go to #QCon.
Yeah.
Again, thank you as always. Always great.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, appreciate it, man. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.